Check, check, check. Check, 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 check. Test, test, test. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, test, test, test. Check, check, check.
¿No? Está en la PPT. Me la mandé como la nota conceptual. No, pues sí. Bueno, yo te mandé la nota conceptual. Ahí está el número. Sí, ahora. Claro, el mail que te mandé, ¿viste que te dije la nota conceptual? Perdón. Que nada para poder. Vamos a tener dos eventos ahora, sí, como dos pegaditos. Lo que quería decir es que en el fondo podemos estar todos adelante, pero donde vamos a tocar a Francisca va a ser en el segundo. Así que si ella se quiere sentar adelante allá al tiro, sí, lo van a hacer en dos bloques. Para que tú le comentes. Primero, te voy a pasar aquí para que tengas aquí.
Hola. Pero son dos bloques, sí. Vamos a hacer. Sí. Exacto, esa. Cuando digas. Ya, ok. Alex, para que tú caches, hermano. Tú vas a ser el moderador de esta actividad, la Camila la representa, panelista, Karina von Schuckmann, y Débora Ley. Sí, eso. ¿Ya? Sí, eso lo tengo acá. Laura me va a poner la PPT ahora, ¿ya? Ya. Chut. Estoy cargando que como supuestamente la Camila iba a producir a los demás, entonces estoy buscando dónde estar. Ese es el panel 1. Ah, no, perdón. No. ¿Ya? Sí. No. Ah, que tú lo tenías en el rey. ¿Qué necesitáis para pasártelo? O sea, como ahora tengo que darlo, ese, ¿no? Ese es el P3. A ver. Sí, pues es el PCC. Claro, es el PCC. Ahí va a tener todo el background, después todo acá. Están los objetivos, los panelistas, lead presenter, moderador, eres tú, lead presenter es Camila, y en el siguiente tú eres el lead presenter y Camila es la moderadora. Ya está el panelista. Yo me busco todo y me paso a la Camila. Sí, exacto. Yeah. Yes, please. Hello, everyone.
Good morning, everyone. I don't know if I'm speaking in Spanish or in English, but maybe in Spanglish. And I would like to say thank you for coming. I would like to introduce that panel about the collaborative scientific assessment for climate actions and about the insight from Chile thematic report. And today I would like to say thank you for joining us on IBC Pavilion. Because today we will share how Chile has co-produced for thematic scientific assessments to support the climate decision making, and we will take a closer look on the oceans climate biodiversity nexus report that we are working right now, and our goal is to reflect on how regional and locally grounded scientific knowledge can complement global assessment processes and how collaborative models threaten climate governance. So in today, I would like to introduce my colleagues here, and I would like to introduce the lead presenter is Camila Fernandez. She's a oceanographer and director of the COPAS. COPAS is a coastal center for the Universidad de Concepción, and researchers at CNRS in Bourdieu's Observatory in France. I hope to say, I got you in France. I am inventing a member of the Scientific Advisory Committee on Climate Change and coordinating author of the Oceans Climate Biodiversity Thematic Report. No? Yeah. No, I think it's because that's what's what. Yeah, I have the same trouble in the beginning. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, but no, it's because the headphone is there. So if you are here, you cannot listen to the, yeah. Her research is focused on marine biochemistry, ecosystem climate interactions, and the role of the coastal and ocean system in climate resilience. She has contributed with scientific scientists processes connecting marine science with national climate policy. Welcome, Camila, for you here. The panelists, and I would like to introduce my friend Karina van Schuckman. She's a senior advisor of the Ocean Science for Policy at Mercator Ocean International in France. Yes. And she's passionate about the ocean. She's interested in understanding the role of the ocean and its interaction in Earth climate systems. Its changes and underlying processes involved. She's amongst others, she's director of the Copernicus Ocean State Report and was and is lead author in the IPCC report, working into the working group 1. And also she's lead author for that coming assessment report 7, author of the Global Meteorological Organization State of the Climate for the UNESCO Ocean Report. She's a member of the several international expert group on science. Also, she's a member of the European Academy of Science, and she has been awarded for French Academy of Science Climate Prize in 2023. Welcome to stay here. And I am so happy to be here with you, Deborah. And we are fighting in different kind of reports. Deborah Lay is an renewable energy and climate change specialist with experience working on the grassroots, local and regional scales across sectors in climate change mitigation and adaptation. She's a multidisciplinary academic and the background is spanning geography and environmental studies, as well as civil mechanical and electrical engineering. And she has supported climate policy and implementations in diverse contexts, including community-based and institutional settings. She is currently coordinator of the Guatemala NDC 3.0 and National Climate Action Plans. She was chief of energy and natural resources at the United Nations in the United Nations Economic Resources Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. She also has been coordinating lead author for several IPCC, IPBES, and UNEP reports. She's volunteers with Engineers Without Borders, and he's editor of the Regional Environmental Change Journal. Welcome, Deborah, and I'd like to leave to my colleague Camila, like lead presenter.
Thank you so much, Alex. Do you hear me? Yes, I will stand because I don't want to be like this. Thank you so much for the opportunity of telling you about the collaborative aspects of our work in Chile as members of the Climate Change Scientific Council for the Ministry of the Environment. Thank you also for the opportunity to Philanthropy Cortes Solari that brought us here, as well as the Ministry of Science and the Ministry of the Environment. It's very important for us to have the chance to talk about these things with you. Next, please. So This is us. This is the Scientific Council for Climate Change in Chile. We are 11 scientists from a broad variety of disciplines, from mental health, engineering, rural structure to ocean and circular economy. We are embedded in the Ministry of the Environment and the policies for climate change. And also we have this wonderful technical secretariat with Carlos. Our mandate by law, and that is something that is very particular of our group, we are mandated by law to provide analysis of and long-term perspective for the government, also prepare technical reports, review documents that has to do with the implementation of the climate change law, and identify global trends, and study and give advice to any topic that might be relevant for the climatic policy in the long run for our country. This is a mandate for 3 years, renewable. That means that every 3 years, people has to apply to be part of this group. And that is a very unique opportunity that we have, at least among Latin American countries. So this is the framework within which we move and we play in the playground of climate change. We go from the review of document that has to do with local and regional aspects of adaptation and mitigation, the sectorial plans. We go to the stakeholders and the scientific advisory on climate change at the national level, but also the management of the long-run, the long-term climate policy that we are going to review now. We just ended our work, finished our work with the NDCs update this year. And before that, we were working on the sectorial plans for the whole variety of economic activities in the country. So what do we really need thematic and co-produced scientific assessments? Well, it's a core of the policy for implementation of the Paris Agreement for once. It is highlighted in every global negotiation that information needs to go from where it's collected, from the territories to the policymakers. And councils like the one we are running in Chile can really make a difference by giving a local characteristic to the policymaking process. So during 2025, we did a lot of dialogue with our colleagues all around Chile. We talked about the regional realities of climate change with scientists, but also with teachers and scholars and students. And we realized that although we were assessing the right documents, the adaptation and mitigation plans, and the national policy and the NDCs at the national level, there was a gap between the regional reality of scientific research being produced and the reaching of that scientific results that are pertinent to climate change, but that we were not being able to collect in time for those specific documents. We also realized as well that we needed to connect sectors that usually don't talk to each other, like food and energy, like health and climate, like ocean biodiversity and climate. So we decided to do something about it and go a step further and generate specific reports that were fed by the dialogues that we had with the scientific community all over the country. The process is here. We defined the topics that we were going to assess in the very specific way, which link we were interested in doing. Then the scoping and outline before going into the territories and talking to the scientific community and appointing the authors. We incorporated the territorial perspective, drafted the reviews, and in January, we are going to launch the final version of all the reports, which you can see here. There are 4 of them that link very specifically health and climate ocean climate and biodiversity, circular economy, and water, energy, and food. Why those four? Well, there's a national coherence in Chile because we are very oriented into natural resources. Our economy is a linear one. We use our natural resources, we produce things, and then the economy runs. Also, we are one of the most vulnerable countries to climate change. We have hydric stress, thermal stress. We have 5,000 kilometers of coast, and therefore the ocean for us and the vulnerabilities are center stage on the adaptation process for the coastal communities, which most of them live within 100 kilometers from the sea. Next. So let me give you just a quick summary of what we preliminary are finding in these connections that are going to be constitutive of our reports. You can download all of them in their QR codes over there, but mainly all of them provide the context of the country, the summary of the chapters that we addressed, like the conceptual framework, the critical factors that, in this case, water, energy, and food defines the relationship within the climate change scenario for food shortage and availability, water crisis, and the energy sector, which also uses a lot of water and influence a lot of the local economy in every possible way. The challenges, gaps, and opportunities are also part of our work. We don't want to be an entity that only review and criticize the process, but also be constructive and provide solutions, because the scientific community is getting really, really good at generating solutions based on scientific knowledge. So we wanted to rescue those and put them center stage. For circular economy, you can download here in the QR code the whole report. There's also a context because, and this is a particular aspect that needs a lot of work in Chile and abroad as well. Chile is a country that relies heavily, as I said, in natural resources, but there's a lot of potential for innovation, for concrete measures that will allow the implementation of, and also the monitoring or circularity within our country. There's a lot to do with waste utilization, with renewables. And so this chapter is going to be very, very interesting for everybody to read. Next one. Health and climate has been all over COP30. There's a lot of talking about how people are mentally and physically affected by climate change, by the thermal stress, by water shortages and food shortages, migrations, stress, and such. So the main factors determining the vulnerability in the human health in Chile related to climate change are underlined. But also challenges, gaps, and opportunities. Sometimes we realize that the main gaps are infrastructural. In other cases are financial. And in other cases, there are just organizational gaps and obstacles that are easily overcome. But that requires a scientific perspective that we want to put forward in these reports. And this is closest to my heart because it's ocean biodiversity and climate. We know that Chile is it hits 7 of the 9 parameters for high vulnerability to climate change. We are experiencing sea level rising. Although our whaling system is getting cooler and cooler, it doesn't mean that the general trend in the Humboldt Current system is also negative. There's niche modifications for our natural resources. So artisanal fisheries as well as industrial fisheries are having to move their activities southward with the financial cost that is associated and the human cost and social cost that is associated to that. So there's a complete assessment of that situation. Also, the critical processes that are physical and biogeochemical that are affecting the whole one ocean as we know it, but specifically the coast of the Southern East Pacific, that is also connected, as we know, with the subantarctic and Antarctic waters. So everything that's happening down there also affects our territory. And the challenges and gaps, as I said before. You can download the report here in the QR. Going into a little bit of the specifics, we highlighted some urgent need for integrated approach and for action in terms of ocean in Chile. We are fully committed to adopting this integrated approach because there's been conversation at the international level that oceans cannot talk to each other alone, while atmospheric science is talking to each other alone, and while forest and biodiversity terrestrial are talking to each other alone. We need to integrate the three because the three are very, very closely connected, and they define the dynamics of the climate that we are experiencing right now. So we recognize our interconnectivity. We recognize also the high dependence of our coastal system to their use and the natural resources that they have. But also we recognize that Chile can and has the potential to become a world leader in ocean science, but also ocean management. Chile is applying for the secretary for the BBNJ agreement that we talked about this morning, but also it has the right framework for connecting science to public policy. So in terms of ocean science, that is what we could define as the right moment for marine science to intervene in public policies and climate change policies. Some key findings to take home. The Hulmokuri system is being modified because, and also connected to the modification of the atmospheric Pacific anticyclone, we are seeing more extreme events like marine heat waves and atmospheric rivers hitting our coast all along the country. So populations are getting more vulnerable and economically more vulnerable as well. Insurance companies are panicking right now because of that. We have the connection between terrestrial drought and the hydric system collapsing in the coastal areas. And so we have severe biogeochemical and physical parameters consequences of that. So we have natural occurring oxygen minimum zones that are expanding dramatically to the south. We have a gap of around 3 to 4 degrees of latitude in which we can now track the signal of the oxygen minimum zones water, which are anoxic environments where, you know, a different kind of life thrives, but it's not really the one that you would think for an upwelling system. And also high socioeconomical vulnerability related to that. People live close to the ocean, they work, and they are basing their local economies in what the ocean can provide. Also, Chile is the second export of salmon in aquaculture of the world, next to Norway, and the first in mussel culture and export. We rely 95% of our export from the ocean. So as you can see, having a report that tracks the climate variability and the consequences from and to the ocean in a country such as ours is critical, is pioneering, and we hope contagious to the rest of the world. Can I have the next? And some solutions and governance that we can talk about right in these panels. There are a lot of potential and a lot of knowledge being accumulated in Chile, and we know that it's increasingly being translated into concrete solutions for adaptation, restoration, and also mitigation. And I think that's it. The relevance, I already said, it is really important for the rest of the world, and I think I will wrap up to give conversation time. Thank you.
Thanks, Camila. I would like to invite Karina and Devi to comment and discuss a panel. And I have some specific question that the Secretariat bring me, but I would like to feel free to ask about your experience because in the case of Devi, like first, and how you be working in different kind of global reports like an IPCC, the Nexus Assessment Report, GEO7, and other ones, and bringing advice for the government. And in your case, Karina, you was working for Mercator Institute. It's a very important, prestigious institute working on ocean indicators. Right now, the oceans is a key issue here. We are talking about the ocean decade. And right now, the ocean is the last frontier. And your last paper about the marine policy, you are proposing a set of indicators. And right now, we are discussing here in COP and set of the 100 adaptation and metrics for adaptation, and we need to include, but nobody's talking express and properly about the oceans. So in your case, and Devi, my question for that kind of report proposed by Chile, that is, it's a scientist's research report, finally. I would like to, if you can bring in your experience, what is the relevance for the different governments and works with the scientific community in order to include the scientific evidence for the adaptation goals and mitigation goals. And in your case, Karina, I would like to ask you the role of the oceans and discuss more deeply and have a hard discussion about the oceans. And we were in NISA, we were talking there, but maybe it's the last frontiers. So what is the relevance of the oceans? That kind of report, Chile is a key actor, but what is the role globally? I would like to start with Devi. Okay, feel free to talk.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. Thank you, Alex, for this kind invitation. So I think that scientific assessments are very important to help guide different government policies. I think there needs to be more coordination between the different scientific bodies, as we see, for example, with UNFCCC and CBD and UNCCD, but also like we find how, and I think we found clear evidence of, for example, how IPCC 6 assessment cycle had results that were key for the IPES, Nexus, and Transformative Change assessments, and that these two assessments had results that are also a handshake or a basis for IPCC's AR7. We found the same in GEO7, and it has been great working with you, Alex, and all of these reports. But I think what we need to see is not just how to enhance the coordination or the receptivity of governments from these assessments, but also greater coordination, because we avoid duplication of efforts, because many times we come up with the same conclusions, like what you were describing of the nexus of food, water, climate, etc. We worked on that in AR6 with system transitions, the need to break sectoral silos and work in a more assessment of IPES really took a deep dive. But what we still see in, for example, many country efforts is that you still have, forests separate from coastal, from sea, and you don't look at the impacts of the whole, say, watershed, impacts of runoffs of like agriculture, industrial waste on coastal areas and whatnot. So, this is to say, as you already highlighted, that there are these interconnections, and that, for example, both in IPCC and IPES, we've identified a cadre of options that can simultaneously achieve and help meet, have positive results in these different, let's call them elements, right? But then we also know that there are options that have a lot of synergies. We also know that there are trade-offs, and that in many cases we can't avoid trade-offs, but it's important to identify them, because then we know how to properly approach them. So like in my case, in working in Guatemala, supporting the Ministry of Environment and Natural Resources and leading the update of the NDC 3.0, something that we did was incorporate elements of system transitions, the multidimensional feasibility assessment, and climate resilient development into the NDC process. So this happened, for example, the previous NDCs had specific sectors that were mitigation and specific ones that were adaptation, and didn't look at the cross between the two of them, didn't look at how, for example, a mitigation option could increase vulnerability somewhere else. So in this iteration, we looked at mitigation and adaptation for all the sectors. We applied the multi-dimensional feasibility assessment because in some cases, the government assigned goals and indicators to actions that weren't feasible because there is a lot of protest from indigenous populations, because there's no governance, because there is a lack of a specific institutional framework. That doesn't mean that it will never happen. It means that it needs to be properly identified and approached as like an enabling condition that maybe in the next NDC we could do as an action. So this has helped identify, specific areas where more action is needed and not so broadly say this is good and this is bad. And it helped look at where we can take more advantage of co-benefits between mitigation and adaptation, and then see, well, here's where we need more funding or better institutional approaches for whatever trade-offs we might see. So, of course, the science policy interface, as you've seen, is not easy. And I think we all collectively need to take these first steps because these are necessary. Science really should guide policy, and science is non-negotiable. But when we take the wrong policy decisions, we can increase maladaptation and injustice and poverty, et cetera. And we really need to approach that. I think in one of my sessions yesterday, somebody made the point of saying that vulnerability is a policy decision and maladaptation is a policy decision. And science is telling us how to avoid that. So for governments like Chile, really taking more advantage of these scientific assessments, using your own at the national level, it's a great first step. And hopefully with Guatemala, the rest of the region, we can continue doing that hand in hand. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for introducing the report, the impressive work which has been done. So I would like to draw on 3 specific messages and taking the ocean as a narrative guidance. So my first point is on the importance why we need these type of reports, and because they are really good endeavors in order to provide a platform where we can do the monitoring and where we can do also all the aspect of evolving our understanding of the ongoing changes in the system. And so, as an example, the ocean is an important climate regulator. So it takes about 90% of the anthropogenic heat, and it's taking up 1/3 of the carbon emissions, with a lot of consequences taking place, such as ocean acidification, such as you mentioned, ocean warming, and then sea level rise, etc. So these are all imminent aspects, on the one hand, the climate system acting us in order to support us and also to somehow mitigate and regulate actions we are taking on pressures from the greenhouse gas emissions, but also showing at the same time the immediate consequences we have because we are putting the pressure into the system, which we have to monitor in order to understand what is changing and how it is changing in order to take then action. And so another aspect is on the aspect we need these reports and we need also these signs to anticipate and also to alert and also to prepare. So another example from the ocean here. So as I just mentioned, the ocean is taking up 90% of the anthropogenic heat. And so when we look at that warming of the ocean, we know that the Earth is out of energy balance. So we're receiving energy from the sun and less is energy leaving the system because of the greenhouse gas emissions. And this leads to an accumulation of heat in the climate system. And 90% of that heat is taken up by the ocean. And so as a consequence, it's warming. But it tells us, hence, on the one hand, that there is an energy imbalance taking place. So it's one message. But the second message is also we can see on the evolution if there's a change in the speed of how fast we are accumulating heat. And also if the heat is going into the deeper layers of the ocean, we also know that we have the number of how much of that heat we have committed for 100 to 1,000 of years. So it's also in terms of a long-term anticipation and alert of the changes in the climate system. Just one of the many examples how helping monitoring, understanding, and reporting on the changes in the Earth system are an endeavor and a guardian for us to act. Then the ocean, of course, is also a great facilitator. So just look above on the other side. So it's really the statement, the ocean unites us. So it can be a facilitator across dialogues, across connecting also the systems and the knowledge, but also the way of how we take action, of how we put our forces together, because we are potentially faced to similar challenges or similar opportunities. And so hence taking this regional action and regional reports and to connect to other regional activities would be a very important endeavor. And then I think something which is really impressive what has been done in this report is to break the silos, right? To be really multidisciplinary, go across the different themes, go across the 3 pillars of sustainable development for the environment, economy, and society, and create those narratives, because this is a way of how, on the one hand, we can better understand what the implications are from these systems, but also it can guide us to better solutions because we have an integrated view on the changes. So, and I think it would be really great to start also dialogue. We see a lot of global change, and there's really the urgent need to regionalize now and to also the local effects such as the report. And there are more and more efforts going on, and I think this is a really an example of what Chile has achieved, and it would be good to start to collaborate on these different regional actors across the world in order to share capacities, to learn lessons and approaches, to help each other in order to work together hand in hand, as you ended as well. Thank you very much.
So I'm taking my notes here. So I have one second and short question. Yeah, I would like to ask you about. Can you hear me very well? Yes, and I would like to ask you in 30 seconds, 1 minute, if you can to respond. One is, what are the main barriers in order to provide the scientific evidence and the decision makers taking that evidence into the policy, in your experience? Because I know always you are working different kind of reports, but you have found it too many barriers. And the second question is about what is the relevance of that kind of report from the scientific community? And for you, Karina, what is the relevance for the countries that have a space into the oceans? And what is the relevance for the country that don't have oceans, access to the oceans? Because sometimes, for you say, no, Switzerland doesn't, they don't have an access for the oceans, but they need that kind of report or not? So my question was, what are the main barriers, like researchers? Have you find it for your career? And the second one is, what are the relevance of that kind of report for the decision makers? Especially because we are negotiating something there in another side of the cup. So.
Thank you. Both are super good questions. In terms of barriers, I would say that they're in many levels, but I'm sure you will point out to some of the other, but at least two that I can say is the very concept that scientists have of science. We know that science is non-negotiable. It's just facts, is what it is. You can rely on that, on the data. But we sometimes forget that it's abstract and mysterious. And we expect to be able to connect the same passion that we have for the scientific results that we collect to the policymakers and the general public. But most of the times, we need an intermediate actor, somebody that can do the clicking between the private sector and the scientific results, between the students, with eco-anxiety and us. So many times I have been fortunate to find that intermediate player, that can understand both worlds, And those hybrids are all around us, they're formed or trained in the scientific world and maybe, going into something else. And they are willing to play this by part, And I think that is kind of the generation of the future that we need, and we need more of that. In terms of why Switzerland would be interested in this, well, it's just kind of the cycle of water, right? We are losing ice masses all over the place, and any really country that rely on natural resources for any activity, whether it's tourism or just cultural appropriation, needs to be concerned about the whole picture. And those reports tackle in this sense, really.
Thank you. As for barriers, I would say that one of them is how we communicate, as scientists, how we communicate the assessments, that sometimes they're too technical. So we have like in IPCC's AR6, we had a summary for urban policymakers, distilling, for example, results for cities, but we had, these other reports or fact sheets like the Adaptation for All, which try to put the summary for policymakers in a more general language. I think something to remember is that these assessments aren't only for policymakers. They're also useful for the general public. They're useful for local communities. And if we can't enable this information to get to local communities, to indigenous populations, I think they lose part of their value. But in not extending it beyond policymakers, it's also that us as citizens can't hold our governments accountable and our policymakers accountable to respect science. So for me, that's one of the biggest barriers. How can we make this information really accessible for all in language and visuals, just in accessibility of being able to download, etc. Why, as a scientist, this is important is I think right now we see in this era a lot of disinformation. And I think these assessments are important because while we see the number of like peer-reviewed articles, white papers, et cetera, just skyrocketing, misinformation is also skyrocketing. And I think these assessments play a key role in trying to, well, as the word is, assess and summarize and bring together everything that there's out there for non-experts to see what is the real science, valid science. I mean, why are we today in 2025 still discussing whether climate change is man-made or not? But when you go to the local communities, to those people who are most vulnerable and marginalized, there are very real impacts of our actions. And I think ultimately we need to think of them. So that's why it's like important for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I start also with the barriers. So one aspect beside the misinformation, fully agree, is also the aspect to break silos. And so I would like to make point to one aspect which is very challenging. This is a bit the internal part, let's say, within the science experts, communities, and you have to be very brave to break silos, right? And you have to really believe, but you could really see when you